Good morning, and thank you for joining us for this special coverage from KREM 2. I'm Tim Pham.
And I'm Nicole Hernandez. Right now, the suspect accused of murdering 4 University of Idaho students, Bryan Kohberger, is about to be in court. We're expecting Kohberger to plead guilty to murdering 4 University of Idaho students. Yeah, you can see right now this is a slate from the courtroom where this will be live streamed here momentarily. We do want to let you know that KREM 2's Amanda Rowley traveled down to Boise overnight and is sitting in the courtroom as we await that decision. The families of the 4 University of Idaho students told us they were sent an email with a letter attached. That letter said Kohberger agreed to plead guilty on all 4 counts of first-degree murder in order to avoid the death penalty. And as we wait for that hearing to get started, we want to remember the 4 students. This has been a long road to get to this day. Madison Mogen, Xander Kernodle, Kaylee Consalves, and Ethan Chapin. These were the 4 students killed in their home overnight on November 13th of 2022. We have new video just into our newsroom of the Chapin family arriving. You see Stacy there, as well as Ethan's triplet siblings, Maisie and Hunter, as well as Ethan's father and other family members arriving in court just moments ago. So our Seattle sister station also spoke with the Consalves family before they were entering. Now, they have been very outspoken in the last few days about how they feel about this plea hearing, saying they are incredibly frustrated with how they were able to get this information and the fact that they were not addressed during this time. Yeah, I was actually texting with the family attorney, Shannon Gray, just a couple of days ago when this news first broke, and he tells me that the family just really feels like this was really rushed. He said getting the news over the weekend, he said that his clients had heard that it could happen on Friday, but getting that news over the weekend and then feeling like they had only a couple of days to get down to Boise, of course they live in North Idaho, was going to be very difficult for them as they continue to work through this legal process. To them, they wanted to see this go to trial. And I think this is a great reminder here about how important this is, that this is about these 4 students here. Madison Mogen, who was just 21 years old and from Coeur d'Alene. Xander Kernodle, who was 20 years old from Avondale, Arizona. Kaylee Consalves, 21 years old from Rathdrum. And Ethan Chapin, 20 years old from Conway, Washington. All of their families, of course, have been extremely hurt over the past 2.5 years over what happened. And this just not the way necessarily that the Consalves family was interested in things ending. Like Tim mentioned, they were expecting to have more say in something like this. And they were very hurt that they were given just a single day's notice to get to Boise. Now, other families, Ethan Chapin and Madison Mogen's families, have been saying that they support the potential for a plea deal. Again, we are waiting for court to get started. It is scheduled to begin any moment now. It was scheduled for this plea hearing at 10 a.m. Pacific time. So any moment now we are expected to have that hearing start. And when it does, we are going to be airing that hearing in its entirety on KREM 2+. That's our streaming platform. You can download it on your TV and watch it for free. It's also going to be on our YouTube page. So I think we started mentioning earlier, the Consalves family actually spoke with our sister station over in Seattle. They were here in Boise just before the hearing got started and actually talked to us. So let's take a listen to what they had to say.
What do you want to happen? Why do you want this to go to trial?
Because then my peers, this community, will decide that he's guilty. We can take it out of freaking Thompson's hands. One man shouldn't decide what 4 souls are worth.
Hear that frustration in Steve Consalves' voice there. That, of course, is Kaylee's father. You also see his mother and other family members arriving at the courtroom as the media is on standby outside of the courtroom. The Consalves family originally saying that they weren't going to have a press conference until afterwards, but Steve took some time there to speak with the media as they entered that courtroom. Again, it is set to begin any moment now. We are waiting for that stream to begin, and when it does, we will let you know, and then you can watch it on KREM 2+. So there's a lot at stake here today. This has been a 2.5-year-long process, from investigations to more evidence findings, as well as several court hearings. The defense and prosecution going back and forth on several key pieces of evidence and things that they wanted to be included, things that they wanted excluded.
So this right here is a live look at the Ada County Courthouse right now. Earlier this morning, we had some live pictures from our Amanda Rowley, who showed lines of people outside. There are a limited number of spots in the court right now. So people lined up starting as early as 2:45 this morning, Boise time, so an hour ahead of us, to get into the courthouse. Our Amanda Rowley is in there waiting for this hearing to start and will, of course, bring us information as soon as that hearing wraps up. Right now, again, this is a live look at the courthouse where we are just waiting for it to get started.
Of course, this is in Ada County. This was moved to Ada County from Latah County because the defense argued that they would not get a fair trial in Latah County. So it was moved to Ada County. Judge Stephen Hippler now presiding over this one, and he will be the one that determines what happens with this plea. Yeah,
this has been a very long 2.5 years. This is a pretty normal timeline for something this big, right? We've spoken to many experts, previous lawyers and attorneys. They say that a case like this will take a long time to come to an end, whether that be a plea deal or a trial. But it's definitely been frustrating for the families, and that's why we hear that frustration in their voices, because ultimately it comes down to the fact that these were 4 young students brutally murdered. This is their pictures again: Madison Mogen, Xander Kernodle, Ethan Chapin, Kaylee Gonsalves. Now, we've been tracking this trial for 2.5 years now. It was scheduled to start in August in Ada County. We are just a month or so away from that date now. And now, after months of the defense trying to get the death penalty off the table for Bryan Kohberger, we're hearing he is going to accept a plea deal in order to avoid it.
Important to note, not all the families are against the plea deal. We know that Madison Mogen's father, Ben Mogen, recently shared messages with us and to CBS News that he is in favor of the plea deal, saying that this would be a better option to spare the family and the public from hearing all the details of the crimes. And to him, this is punishment enough. We also are hearing from the Chapins. The Chapins also saying that this is what they agree with, that they are okay with the plea deal. We have not heard from Xander Kernodle's family, but Kaylee Gonsalves' family, obviously the ones that are not in favor of this plea deal. I want to break this down for you, though, because there are some outcomes today. There's different things that could happen from today's hearings. First, this is one scenario that could play out. Kohberger and Judge Stephen Hippler accept a plea, and the judge sentences him immediately, and that could happen today.
Another option, of course, being that Kohberger and the judge accept the plea and the judge schedules a sentencing date. If that happens, victim impact statements would be part of that sentencing. Finally, the last option for today, Kohberger or the judge could reject the plea deal. That, though, a very rare instance. If that happens, the trial will continue as planned in August. And again, we mentioned earlier, the defense has been trying to get the death penalty off the table for Bryan Kohberger for the past few months, using a couple of different techniques. One, they said that Kohberger has autism and that somebody with autism should not be given the death penalty. They also introduced alternate suspects for the case. There was a back and forth between defense, prosecution, and the judge as to who those potential alternate suspects were and whether or not there was genuine evidence about those. Even into trial, had the trial continued to happen, they were going back and forth on where those alternate suspect evidence pieces would be used in the trial. So again, those things did not work. Judge Hippler consistently denying the fact that the death penalty could be taken off the table. And that puts us here today at Kohberger potentially pleading guilty to avoid getting the death penalty. Instead of the death penalty, the prosecution says they would be pursuing 4 consecutive life sentences.
Yeah, so I've been listening to a lot of legal analysts who say that really because the defense exhausted all of their options, they felt that a plea deal would be the final resort, and that's where we are here today. So that is why it is expected that the defense will come in and enter this guilty plea.
Yeah, so we have been taking a look at the courthouse, of course, all morning. Earlier this morning, we had people lining up to get into the courthouse. Of course, spots reserved for family, and our Amanda Rowley there as well. As soon as that gets started, we will be there to have information. We actually have somebody with us here this morning, an expert. We're going to get to that in just a few minutes. But for now, we just want to give you one quick recap. If you're just joining us here, this is about the Bryan Kohberger plea deal hearing. That was supposed to start at 10 o'clock this morning. We are about 10 minutes past that. It's happening 11 o'clock Boise time. It is in Ada County where this is happening. This is for Bryan Kohberger, the person who is accused of murdering Madison Mogen, Xana Kernodle, Kaylee Gonsalves, and Ethan Chapin. This right here, a live look right now at the Ada County Courthouse where this will be taking place today. We are expecting Kohberger to plead guilty, changing his plea of not guilty in order to avoid the death penalty.
All right. We do have a guest with us here in studio. Steve Graham joining us here in the KREM 2 studio, former prosecutor and defense lawyer. You are a defense lawyer. Thank you so much for being here with us this morning.
Good morning. Glad to be here.
Yeah, this is a big news day here. A lot of people watching this case, and obviously you're not directly involved, but you can kind of glean some perspective on this situation. Can you tell us more about how the defense got to this point? Do you feel like they really exhausted all of their options?
They did. They were nothing if not thorough, and they really kept at it, and ended up sparing their client's life after foreclosing other options. So they were very thorough and got a good deal for their client, I believe.
I think something that's interesting for somebody who hasn't followed a case of this caliber, it felt like every 2 weeks, every month, we were seeing something else from the defense. Is that a normal thing in a case of this caliber?
Well, yeah, they're not supposed to leave any stone unturned. They were, very thorough, and that's typically how it goes. When someone's life is on the line, they're supposed to do everything possible to spare that individual's life.
So another question that we've had is the families, a couple of them potentially not so happy with how this happened, whether they accept the fact that it's a plea deal or not. The Gonsalves family has been very vocal about the fact that it happened very quickly, it felt rushed. Is this normal, or are typically families more involved in this plea deal process?
Typically, I think on a case of this, gravity with such a heinous act, times 4, there would be more of a opportunity, I think, for them to sit down and meet with the prosecutor. So that is a little surprising, but plea deals are often struck at the last minute too. But it's a prosecutor's job to really listen to the families exhaustively.
But there's 4 in this case.
Yeah, and do that exhaustively, and we've heard the criticism that that wasn't entirely done.
Sure. So the Gonsalves family, obviously, they have been the most vocal of the 4 families. One of the things that they are asking for is not only the guilty plea, but also a full admission, details of the night of the murders, but also locating the murder weapon. Is that something that they can ask for in a plea deal in a situation like this, or would the judge not allow that?
They could ask for that. A prosecutor may set whatever conditions he or she wants on any offers made. And it doesn't seem like a real unreasonable request from the perspective of the family. Some of that might be coming later on. But it seems like if his life is spared, then the family should be entitled to get answers to these questions. So that's I guess, to be seen.
Yeah.
So can you walk us through the process of how a plea deal works? Who would have asked for it or given it, or just the whole process of how this would work?
Well, plea negotiations can often be rather quick. It can be made on the elevator coming down from the courthouse at the end of the day. And, when one side is ready to say uncle and, give up their earlier request, give up the insistence that he's innocent, give up this insistence that there be the death penalty. So it might have happened really quick. It seems to happen real quick, or it may have been percolating for months. But, Yes. In my experience, these things can be brokered rather quick.
Well, Mr. Graham, thank you so much for joining us. We do want to let our viewers at home know that the stream in Ada County has just started.
Excellent.
And again, we are streaming this now live on KREM 2 Plus. You can watch it in its entirety. Again, KREM 2 Plus is our free streaming app. You can download it and watch for free.
Mr. Horowitz, Ms. Jennings, and Mr. Nye is here as well. Am I missed anybody? I'm sorry.
Ms. Allen is here as well.
Ms. Allen is here as well. Very well, thank you. All right, we are here today to entertain a change of plea. Before I start, I want to address some issues of concern and otherwise. First, I appreciate everybody in attendance today being on their best behavior. Please, no outbursts or demonstrations. Any such conduct will result in immediate removal and may result in an inability to attend further court proceedings in this case. I want to point out that there have been calls by some for the public to contact me and my office in an attempt to influence my decision-making in this case. This has been extraordinarily disruptive for court staff and the ability for them to get work done, not only in this case, but in other cases where defendants are entitled to have their cases processed, and frankly, as important, if not more so, for victims to have their cases processed in those cases. It's also highly inappropriate. A court is not supposed to, and this court will never, take into account public sentiment in making an opinion regarding its judicial decisions in cases. Courts should, and I always will, make decisions based on where the facts and the law lead me, period. I have not read any of the numerous messages nor listened to any of the numerous voicemails that have been sent to me and my staff. Those have all been forwarded to security and, where appropriate, to law enforcement. I ask that you not continue to mount such campaigns or to send me information like this because, again, it is not appropriate and, frankly, not something I would take into account when deciding a matter in a case like this. I also want people to understand some very basic concepts about the ideas of separation of powers and what the court's duties are and what the duties and the rights of the executive, or in this case, the prosecuting attorney, is. The executive, the elected prosecutor, is the sole authority in deciding what charges to pursue, including whether, as well as what penalties to ask for, and what penalties to pursue, including the death penalty. This court cannot require the prosecutor to seek the death penalty, nor would it be appropriate for this court to attempt to do that. This court, in considering a plea agreement, if it were to reject this plea agreement, cannot force the state to seek the death penalty. My role and power in considering a plea agreement is extremely limited. My role is to ensure that the defendant's plea is given freely, voluntarily, and intelligently. If those things are met, I can only reject a plea, such as the one in this case, where I'm not being asked to agree to the sentence in advance. I can only reject it, for example, if the defendant does not meet or admit to all of the elements of the crime. That is, I can ensure what is called a factual basis to the plea. Finally, I want to offer my apologies to all the families, including the victims' families, the families of the defendant, for the short notice for today's hearing, and I'm sure what must have been the hurried efforts to get here. I, like most everyone else, learned of this plea agreement Monday afternoon and had no inkling of it beforehand. Prior to that time, I was under the belief that this case was proceeding to trial, as had been indicated, and my staff and I were busy continuing to work on preparations to have potentially 10,000 citizens of Ada County come to jury duty starting in mid-July, with the questionnaire process in mid-July. It was, once I learned of the defendant's decision to change his plea in this case, it was important that I take the plea as soon as possible because of the extraordinary administrative efforts that were otherwise attendant to the process of this getting this trial potentially underway on time, and including the significant process of bringing, again, potentially up to 10,000 jurors to come in and fill out juror questionnaires prior to the beginning of the voir dire process. And so it was important that we, if we're going to go down this road, do so expeditiously so that we can avoid those costs and expenses associated with that. Otherwise, if it was not going to result in a plea, or if for some reason the plea were to fall through today, that we could continue diligently towards trial at the time specified. And so that obviously required that we act quickly, and so some folks may have not had the amount of time that we would otherwise allow for them to travel here. And so, again, I apologize for that. I want to make people aware that during the hearing, if you are to leave the courtroom for any reason, you will not be readmitted during the hearing. Also, when we finish the hearing this morning, I ask that the public and media wait in their seats until the victims' families and the defendants' families and others are escorted out of the courtroom before you start to leave. Finally, I want to acknowledge the trial court administrator and her staff, the Ada County Sheriff, and the Ada County 4th District Marshal Service for the huge lift that they've accomplished in preparing for and orchestrating this hearing today, as well as to all the security attendant today that you see, and some of whom many of whom you don't see, with less than 48 hours notice. And so I appreciate the hard work that they've been doing. Frankly, some of them while they were on some vacation prior to the trial starting and had to call that short. And so I appreciate very much their professionalism and dedication. All right. That said, let's move to the business of today. I understand the state and the defense have reached a plea agreement in this case. For the record, I have a written plea agreement which indicates, in sum, the defendant will plead guilty to all 5 counts in the indictment: burglary, felony, and first-degree murder, 4 counts. The state and the defendant stipulate, that is, that the defense is not free to argue for a lesser sentence at sentencing, to the following. The defendant on the burglary charge will be sentenced to 10 years fixed, and that the defendant on counts 2 through 5, the 4 counts of first-degree homicide, on each count would receive a fixed life sentence, all 5 of those counts to run consecutive to one another. Defendant, as part of the plea agreement, waives his right to appeal, as well as his right to appeal the sentence and his right to seek leniency or reconsideration of the sentence under Idaho Criminal Rule 35. This is not a Rule 11 agreement. meaning the court is not bound by the plea agreement and could impose a different lawful sentence at sentencing. The stipulated agreement between the parties is the maximum on each count. So theoretically, the only thing the court could do would be a lesser sentence at sentencing. But the defendant is not free to ask the court to do so under the plea agreement. Are there any other material terms of the plea agreement that the parties would like to make? Obviously, the plea agreement, the written plea agreement will speak for itself and be part of the court record.
Not from the state, Your Honor. Thank you.
No, Your Honor. Thank you.
All right, very well. All right. Ms. Taylor, have you had sufficient time to discuss this case and all of its ramifications with your client?
I have, Your Honor.
Have you discussed fully with him his rights, defenses, and possible consequences to him of the guilty plea?
Yes, Your Honor.
Have you been able to do all the discovery you feel necessary?
Yes, Your Honor.
And have you informed your client of the importance of providing the court truthful and accurate answers in taking this plea today?
I have.
Have you apprised your client of any and all offers and counter-offers and answered his questions about those?
Yes,
Do you consent to the entry of the plea today?
I do.
All right, Mr. Kohberger, I need to ask you some questions this afternoon, or I guess it's this morning still. I do this to ensure that so that I am assured that you understand the nature of the charges to which I understand you're going to plead guilty, as well as the possible consequences to you of your guilty pleas. I want to make sure your plea is given voluntarily, and I want to make sure that you actually committed the crimes to which you're pleading guilty, because I don't want you to plead guilty to a crime you didn't commit. If you attempt to plead guilty today, but for some reason I don't accept your plea, then it is possible that your statements today could be used against you later at trial. Do you understand that?
Yes.
All right, thank you. And now, while you're standing, actually, why don't you take the oath from the clerk?
Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you shall give in the matter not given before this court shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes.
All right, and Mr. Kohberger, just to make it easier, you don't need to stand when you speak to me. I appreciate the sign of respect, but for convenience, you can remain seated, all right? Before I start asking you questions today, have you consumed substantive questions? Let me ask you, have you consumed any alcohol, drug, or other intoxicating substance that would impair your ability to understand or exercise reasonable judgment?
No.
You feel like you are thinking clearly today?
Yes.
All right, I want you to understand what the possible penalties are for each of the crimes to which I understand you're going to offer a guilty plea today. They include, on count one, the burglary, a fine of up to $50,000 and a period of incarceration of up to 10 years in the state penitentiary. You may be required to pay restitution to any victims of the crime. Count 2, 3, 4, and 5 for first-degree murder. The consequences include a fine of up to $50,000, a period of incarceration of life imprisonment, which is a requirement of a sentence, that it be a life sentence with a mandatory minimum sentence of at least 10 years on each of those counts. In addition, you would be potentially responsible for a fine of up to $5,000 to each of the victims of your crime, to be enforced in the form of a civil judgment, to operate as additional punishment. This is in excess of any restitution or fines that the court could order. And again, you may be required to pay restitution to the victims of the crime. You would be required to provide, as to counts 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, a DNA sample and a right thumbprint impression, and potentially pay for analysis of those samples. You would lose any right to possess, purchase, or carry a firearm, the right to serve on jury duty, the right to hold public office, and the right to vote. Do you understand the charges and all those possible consequences?
Yes.
You've heard the plea agreement that I talked about today. Do you agree with that plea agreement?
Yes.
And do you understand the nature of the charges that are that you've been charged with that I understand you're going to plead guilty today to?
Yes.
As I indicated, I'm not bound by the plea agreement, but the plea agreement is for the maximum on each count. Do you understand that I'm not bound by the plea agreement?
Yes.
Has anyone promised you that I would be lenient or easy on you if you pled guilty?
No.
Has anyone threatened you or anyone close to you to get you to plead guilty?
No.
Has anyone, other than the state's agreements with respect to the plea agreement, has anyone promised you anything in exchange for your plea agreement?
No.
Has anyone told you to be untruthful in answering my questions today?
No.
Has anyone offered you a reward of any kind other than the plea agreement in order to get you to plead guilty today?
No.
Are you pleading guilty because you are guilty?
Yes.
And counsel, obviously there have been a number of motions filed to suppress evidence in this case. Other than those filed, are there any other motions that you felt were available with respect to Rule 12?
No, Your Honor.
And Mr. Kohberger, you understand that by entering the guilty plea in this case, you would be giving up your right to appeal any decision this court made, as well as your sentence?
Yes.
Have you had enough time to decide whether or not to plead guilty?
Yes.
Are you pleading guilty freely and voluntarily?
Yes.
Given your choices, do you believe it's in your best interest to plead guilty?
Yes.
Have you discussed fully the matter of pleading guilty with your attorney, and are you satisfied with the advice you've received?
Yes.
Has your attorney advised you to your satisfaction about what your rights are, what your defenses may be, and what the possible consequences to you of your guilty plea are?
Yes.
Has your attorney done everything you've asked them to do?
Yes.
Are you satisfied with their representation of you?
Yes.
I have received a written guilty plea advisory questionnaire that is purported to be filled out by you. Did you fill that document out?
Yes.
Did you understand the questions that you answered in this document?
Yes.
And are the answers that are outlined in this document your answers?
Yes.
Are those answers truthful?
Yes.
Did you sign the document?
Yes.
And this document outlines many of the rights that you have in this case should you not plead guilty. Did you understand those rights?
Yes.
They include a right to a jury trial. Do you understand that?
Yes.
They include a right to the presumption of innocence. Do you understand that?
Yes.
They have the right to require the state to prove your guilt as to each element beyond a reasonable doubt. Do you understand that?
Yes.
They include a right to confront your accusers and cross-examine witnesses presented by the state, including by utilizing the subpoena power of the court to accomplish that. Do you understand that?
Yes.
You understand you would have a privilege against self-incrimination and a right to remain silent, meaning you would not be compelled to testify if you did not wish to, had you not pled guilty.
Yes.
You understand you're giving up that privilege and those rights that I've just outlined by pleading guilty.
Yes.
All right, I want you to understand what the state would have had to have proven at trial had you, as to the crimes that you're pleading guilty to, had you, if you didn't plead guilty. Let me find the document. Hang on a second here. All right. So as to count one burglary, the state would have to have proven that on or about November 13, 2022 in Latah County, Idaho, you unlawfully entered a residence located at 1122 King Road in Moscow, Idaho, with the intent to commit the felony crime of murder. As to count two, the state would have had to have proven that on or about that same date in Latah County, Idaho, you did willfully, unlawfully, deliberately, with premeditation and malice aforethought, kill and murder Madison Mogen, a human being, by stabbing Madison Mogen, from which she died. As to count three, the state would have had to have proven that on that same date in Latah County, at that same address, you did willfully, unlawfully, deliberately, with premeditation and malice aforethought, kill and murder Kaylee Gonzalez, a human being, by stabbing her, from which she died. As to count four, the state would have had to have proven that on or about that same date in Latah County, Idaho, you did willfully, unlawfully, deliberately, with premeditation and malice aforethought, kill and murder Xana Kernodle, a human being, by stabbing her, from which she died. And then as to count five, also murder in the first degree, that on or about November 13th, 2022, in Latah County, Idaho, you did willfully, unlawfully, deliberately, with premeditation and malice aforethought, kill and murder Ethan Chapin, a human being, by stabbing him, from which he died. Do you understand those things the state would have had to have proven?
Yes.
And do you understand that by pleading guilty, the state no longer has to prove those things because you're admitting those things are true?
Yes.
I want to also make, for the record, the defendant has provided with the guilty plea advisory form a document entitled Written Factual Basis that purports to have the defendant's signature dated 1 July 2025. Did you sign that document?
Yes.
And did you agree with the written factual basis that is included there?
Yes.
And then let me ask you, did you, on November 13th, 2022, enter the residence at 1122 King Road in Moscow, Idaho, with the intent to commit the felony crime of murder?
Yes.
Did you, on November 13th, 2022, in Latah County, state of Idaho, kill and murder Madison Mogen, a human being?
Yes.
And did you do that willfully, unlawfully, deliberately, and with premeditation and malice aforethought?
Yes.
Did you, on or about that same date in Moscow, Idaho, kill and murder Kaylee Gonzalez, a human being?
Yes.
And did you do that willfully, unlawfully, deliberately, and with premeditation and malice aforethought?
Yes.
And did you, on that same date in Moscow, Idaho, kill and murder Xana Kernodle, a human being?
Yes.
And did you do that willfully, unlawfully, deliberately, with premeditation and malice aforethought?
Yes.
And then on or about November 13th, 2022, again in Latah County, Idaho, did you kill and murder Ethan Chapin, a human being?
Yes.
Did you do that willfully, unlawfully, deliberately, with premeditation and malice aforethought?
Yes.
I would ask the state at this time to provide its recitation of its factual basis had this case gone to trial.
Thank you, Your Honor. Your Honor, the organization of the recitation is different than what I think the court and the public may be familiar with from the probable cause affidavit and other documents. The state's evidence, as an overview, would show that back in March of 2022, when the defendant was residing at his parents' residence or was residing back in Pennsylvania, his home state, he purchased online a K-bar knife and sheath with an Amazon gift card that he had purchased shortly prior to the purchase of the knife, sheath, and sharpener. Jumping ahead, the end of June of that year, the defendant, Mr. Kohberger, moved from Pennsylvania to Pullman, Washington, which is right across the state line from Moscow, Idaho, for the purpose of pursuing a PhD in criminal justice at Washington State University. The state's evidence would indicate that beginning July 9th of 2022, Mr. Kohberger's phone began connecting to a cell tower that serves the area of the 1122 King Road residence in Moscow, Idaho. Now, I will acknowledge for the court and all present that there are many residences in that area. It's a dense population of mostly college-related occupants. Between July 9th of 2022 and November 7th, the defendant's phone connected to that particular tower during late night, early morning hours, 10 p.m. to 4 a.m., on approximately 23 times. Now, I will acknowledge also we do not have evidence that the defendant had direct contact with 1122 or with residents of 1122, but we can put his phone in that area on those times. In the interim, on August 22nd of 2022, Lake Tahoe County Sheriff's Deputy Darren Duke conducted a traffic stop in the early morning hour or late evening hours, about 11 p.m., on the west side of Moscow, on the Moscow-Pullman Road. This was the traffic stop of Mr. Kohberger's car, which turned out to be a 2015 white Hyundai Elantra with Pennsylvania plates. During the course of the traffic stop, Deputy Duke was able to obtain Mr. Kohberger's name, Bryan Kohberger, his phone number, and his address, which at that point was an apartment address in Pullman. We then move to the early morning hours of November 13th, 2022. The state's evidence would show that early morning hours on that day, Mr. Kohberger's phone left his Pullman residence, which is an apartment in kind of the central northwest part of Pullman. That phone was then subsequently turned off at approximately 2:54 a.m. and remained off until approximately 4:48 a.m. on Sunday, the 13th of November. The state's evidence would include a trial, video surveillance of a business on the Moscow-Pullman Highway just across the state line from Moscow that would show a vehicle matching the description of the defendant's Hyundai Elantra entering Moscow at approximately 3:02 a.m. Compiled surveillance that the investigators put together from businesses and residents then show the defendant's car, the white Elantra, as I've described, circling the 1122 King Road area, that neighborhood, starting around 3:30 or so in the morning. Comes into the immediate area of 1122 King Road, which is actually on a dead end, and then leaves several times. And approximately 4:05 that morning, the defense car had entered that area, was leaving, stopped at the intersection of King and Queen Road, did a U-turn, and the state's evidence would show that the defendant's car came back and parked behind and above the 1122 King Road residence. The state believes that its evidence would then show that the defendant entered the residence of 1122 through the kitchen sliding door on the back side of the residence, which is the side of the residence that would face the area above where the defendant's car was parked. Defendant entered the residence, went to the third floor, and with a knife, killed Madison Mogan and Kaylee Gonzalez. The defendant, as he left that room, for whatever reason, ended up leaving, or the sheath for a K-bar knife was left on the bed next to Madison Mogan's body. And I can jump ahead. That sheath was tested by the Idaho State Police Forensic Lab, and single-source male DNA was found on the snap of that sheath, as well as blood from both Kaylee and Madison and other trace evidence. But it's important to note single-source male DNA was on the snap of that sheath. The state's evidence would show that Xana Knodel was still awake at this time. In fact, had taken a DoorDash order not long before this started. Her room was not on the third floor. It was on the second floor on the west side. As the defendant was either coming down the stairs or leaving, he encountered Xana, and he ended up killing her, also with a large knife. Ethan Chapin, Zama's boyfriend, was asleep in their bedroom, in her bedroom, and the defendant killed him as well with a large fixed-blade knife. Each victim suffered multiple wounds. I will state for the record that there is no evidence there was any sexual component or sexual assault on any of the victims. I want to make that clear so there's no speculation. There were two other roommates in the house, and they were already asleep. During the course of this, one of those roommates awoke, looked out her door not knowing what was going on, and saw the defendant, who was dressed in black with black balaclava on, holding some sort of container in his hand. And she saw him leave the house through the direction of the kitchen where that sliding door is that I mentioned before. At approximately 4:20 that morning, so this would have been 15 minutes or so later, the defendant's car is seen on a surveillance camera for 1112 King Road, which is immediately next door to the west of 1122, leaving the area at a high rate of speed. And if the court were to see that, or anybody in this courtroom would see that, you can see the car almost loses control as it makes the corner, heads north, and then turns to go south on Walinta, which is one of the only ways to get out of that part of town. The evidence would show that following that, the defendant in his Elantra drove south of Moscow. We know that he drove on the back roads because there are surveillance cameras on the main highways, Highway 95, that would have picked up the defendant's car if he'd gone that route. And they did not show the defendant's car on that route during the time. So we know that he went through a variety of back roads in very rural, isolated part of Latah County. About 4:48 that morning, the defendant's phone comes back on. And the evidence will show that that phone was located south of Moscow, likely at a side road intersection with Highway 95. From there, the defendant's phone activity tracks it heading back north towards Pullman, Washington, where the defendant lived. About 5:26, starting approximately 5:26, various surveillance cameras in Pullman, Washington pick up the defendant's vehicle as he enters Pullman from the south and heads north and slightly west towards his apartment, where he arrived at approximately 5:30 in the morning. Later that morning, Sunday, the 13th of November of 2022, Mr. Kohberger's phone returned to the area of King Road. We don't know exactly what he did, but it returned to that area. It's about 9 o'clock in the morning. He was there for about 10 minutes and then returned to his Pullman residence. About 9:30, the state's evidence will show, evidence taken from the defendant's phone, that he took a selfie of himself on his phone in what appears to be the bathroom of his Pullman apartment with a thumbs up. The defendant's phone then went to the Lewiston-Clarkston Valley, approximately 30 miles south of Moscow and Pullman. And the defendant is actually seen with his car at various businesses down there. This area is the confluence of the Clearwater River and the Snake River. Lewiston is Idaho's seaport. Large bodies of moving water down there. In addition to tracing the defendant's activities, as I've just outlined, on the 13th and leading up to the 13th, the state's evidence will show that following Sunday, November 13th of 2022, business records show that the defendant began searching for a K-bar knife and a K-bar knife sheath, as the state believes, to replace the one that was left at the scene of the murders. The evidence also will suggest that there were at least attempts by the defendant to delete or alter his purchase history on Amazon, where all these transactions had occurred. Later that week, the state's evidence will show that Mr. Kohberger went to what we would call DMV, motor vehicle licensing here in Idaho, in Pullman, to change his car registration from Pennsylvania to Washington. That's of note because Pennsylvania cars do not require a front license plate. The vehicles seen on the surveillance cameras of the defendant's car showed it didn't have a front license plate on it. At the time of the traffic stop by Deputy Duke in August, it was Pennsylvania plate, no front license plate. Mr. Kohberger proceeded to finish his semester of studies at Washington State University and returned to Pennsylvania for the holidays. Law enforcement at this point were aware of Mr. Kohberger, had been accessing information about him, were trying to find him. They located him in Pennsylvania, and they conducted what's called a trash pull. During the nighttime hours, agents of the FBI, who assisted immensely with this case, working with the sanitation department back in this neighborhood in Pennsylvania, took trash that had been set out on the street for collection, sent the contents of that from the Pennsylvania residence of the defendant's parents to the Idaho State Forensic Laboratory, where the lab experts there were able to identify DNA on a Q-tip as coming from the father of the person whose DNA was found on the knife sheath that was next to Madison Mogen's body in the bed. Subsequently, an arrest warrant was issued here in Idaho, and a search warrant was issued in the state of Pennsylvania with the assistance not only of the FBI, but the Pennsylvania State Police. Mr. Kohberger was arrested at his parents' home to return to Idaho. Upon his return to Idaho, a DNA sample was taken from him, and it matched the DNA found on the knife sheath next to Maddie's body at the crime scene. I can tell the court, and the public, the weapon itself, the knife, has not yet been recovered. I can tell the court that the defendant's apartment in Pullman was searched, as well as his office. Spartan would be a kind characterization. There was virtually nothing there. Nothing of evidentiary value was found. And of course, we are now talking 6-8 weeks after the time of the killings. In Pennsylvania, the defendant's car was seized, and it was actually pretty much disassembled internally. And it also had been cleaned. There was a bucket of cleaner right beside it. I think we can all look to our own cars, you know, in those compartments in the doors. We try to keep them clean where you put stuff. There's always some degree of crud in there. They were spotless. The defendant's car had been meticulously cleaned inside. And the state would present to the jury that that was part of the defendant's plan in covering up this. The defendant has studied crime. In fact, he did a detailed paper on crime scene processing when he was working on his pre-doctorate degrees, and he had that knowledge and skill. So, Your Honor, at the end, the state submits that the evidence that I've given just a quick overview of, and that to present in court would consume weeks, which the state is prepared to do and has been prepared to do, would show that as the defendant has just admitted and pleaded guilty on November 13th, 2022, Mr. Kohberger entered the residence at 1122 King Road in Moscow, Idaho. He did that with the intent to kill. We will not represent that he intended to commit all of the murders that he did that night, but we know that that is what resulted, and that he then killed intentionally, willfully, deliberately, with premeditation, and with malice forethought, Maddie Mogen, Kaylee Gonzalez, Ethan Chapin, and Santa Colonel. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, based on the state's proffer and importantly based upon defendant's explicit admission to committing these crimes, the court finds there is a factual basis. Therefore, with respect to count 1, burglary, felony, how do you plead, Mr. Kohberger, guilty or not guilty?
Guilty.
As to count 2, murder in the first degree as it relates to the murder of Madison Mogen, how do you plead, guilty or not guilty?
Guilty.
As to count 3, as it relates to murder in the first degree for the murder of Kaylee Gonzalez, how do you plead, guilty or not guilty?
Guilty.
As to count 4, the first degree murder of Xana Kernodle, a human being, how do you plead, guilty or not guilty?
Guilty.
As to count 5, the first-degree murder of Ethan Chapin, a human being, how do you plead, guilty or not guilty?
Guilty.
Right. The court will find that the defendant understands the nature of the charges and each offense and the possible consequences to him of his guilty plea. The court finds that there is a factual basis for the plea and that finds the defendant believes the plea to be in his best interest. I find that the plea was given freely, voluntarily, and was intelligently made. I accept the plea. I direct that it be entered. I'll continue the matter for sentencing in this case. I think it was mentioned on the call Monday afternoon the defense wishes to waive a pretrial investigation. Is that accurate?
Yes, Your Honor.
The state also?
Yes, Your Honor. The state does not believe pre-sentence investigation is needed given the evidence that is available. We want to, though, make sure that all of the victims have the opportunity to make statements to the court at sentencing.
Absolutely. And certainly both the state and the defense may present whatever sentencing memorandum and other documents you wish me to consider. The victims will be given an opportunity to provide the statements that they wish to at sentencing. Do we need more than one full day for sentencing?
I do not believe so, Your Honor. Obviously, we have numerous victims, and we have victims who share unique perspectives on this, and we want to make sure that they all have time to express their feelings to the court. But I believe that if we can start perhaps 8:30 or so in the morning, that we should be able to complete it all in one day.
Defense agree with that in terms of the time frame?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right. So as it happens, we have some time reserved in this case in July and August. The week of July 22nd is available. I don't know if that's too soon for the parties, or the next week, the week of August 4, is available. Any preference?
Your Honor, we're prepared as soon as the court wants to schedule it.
The state, I believe, would be prepared on the 22nd. Right. We've told the victims' families that we're looking at approximately those dates.
All right. So because of the plan to bring in so many jurors to fill out questionnaires, I had ordered that no other trials could take place in this courthouse the week of July 22nd. And so we will use that in terms of the sentencing date because of what I'm sure will be the significant interest of the media and the public and the logistics that will be required to make that happen. Without trials going, it'll be a lot easier to do that. So let's pick that week. Why don't we pick July 23rd with the idea that if for some reason we don't finish, we could continue into the 24th. We'll start at 9 in the morning. Does that give your team enough time, Sandra? 9 in the morning? All right. Any concerns with that date?
No, Your Honor. Thank you.
No, sir.
All right. Any reason why I should not rescind the non-dissemination order at this time?
You're right. I think that given the history of this case, it would be best if that remained in place through sentencing, so we have time to make sure there's the ability to completely answer questions. That would be the state's preference and recommendation.
We'd have no objection for the order to remain in place through sentencing.
All right. I will, at this point, the idea to keep it until sentencing, which time it would be withdrawn in order to give the parties the space and time to prepare to meet what I'm sure will be the deluge of media requests. That's at least my preliminary decision at this point. We can always revisit if it seems to be, for some reason, I should. That said, obviously, I don't think the defendant, a bond was ever set for the defendant. Were it would be revoked. The prior order allowing him to come in civilian clothes is revoked, given his plea and no longer the presumption of innocence. And in fact, now the actual conviction for the crimes He will continue to be held at the jail pending sentencing. Is there anything else today?
No, Your Honor. Thank you.
I assume that the trial date will be vacated and those 4 jurors will be released.
The trial will be vacated, and I'm sure that the jury commissioner will get word to those that receive their summons that they won't be required to attend. So that said, again, if you would all please wait for the parties and the victims' families and others to leave the courtroom before you do, I would appreciate it. And with that, we're adjourned. All right, please.
Well, good morning. Thank you for joining us for this special edition of KREM 2 News. I'm Tim Pham.
And I'm Nicole Hernandez. Just a few minutes ago, out of Boise, Bryan Kohberger pleaded guilty to the murders of 4 University of Idaho students.
It ended just moments ago, and it's the end to a tragic story that's brought heartbreak to across the inland Northwest and all over the world for the past 2.5 years.
So we have Steve Graham with us here in studio. You are an expert in trials like this. You just said to us you thought this lasted shorter than normal. Why is that?
Well, it was kind of surprisingly matter of fact, and even, a plea for a misdemeanor charge would probably take half the time. But the judge was thorough as he went through, the defendant's rights that he was giving up. But it just kind of struck me how routine it all seemed. There's certainly nothing on Mr. Kohberger's expression to indicate that he was, pleading to anything other than, a traffic violation, really. He was very, very kind of matter of fact and stone-faced.
Was the process very standard? You said it was very routine.
Yeah.
So we heard yes/no answers. You had mentioned to me just before we got on set that sometimes it could be a little bit more than just a yes or no.
Well, usually it's a yes, Your Honor, or yes, sir. The formality of the proceeding kind of calls for that. But we didn't hear Mr. Kohberger say anything other than yes or no.
But this wouldn't be an opportunity for him to say anything beyond yes or no, really.
Yeah. Sometimes you see a nod at the head or, something a little more. Something a little more.
Well, we actually have video of the time that Kohberger said he was guilty of these crimes. So we want to get to that so you can see exactly how this happened.
Based on the state's proffer and, importantly, based upon defendants' explicit admission to committing these crimes, the court finds there is a factual basis. Therefore, with respect to count 1, burglary, felony, how do you plead, Mr. Kohberger, guilty or not guilty?
Guilty.
As to count 2, murder in the first degree, as it relates to the murder of Madison Mogan, how do you plead, guilty or not guilty?
Guilty.
As to count 3, as it relates to murder in the first degree for the murder of Kaylee Gonsalves, how do you plead, guilty or not guilty?
Guilty.
As to count 4, the first-degree murder of Xana Kernodle, a human being, how do you plead, guilty or not guilty?
Guilty.
As to count 5, the first-degree murder of Ethan Chapin, a human being, how do you plead, guilty or not guilty?
Guilty.
Right. The court will find that the defendant understands the nature of the charges and each offense and the possible consequences to him of his guilty plea. The court finds that there is a factual basis for the plea and finds the defendant believes the plea to be in his best interest. I find that the plea was given freely, voluntarily, and was intelligently made. I accept the plea. I direct that it be entered.
Back in, Steve Graham with us, defense lawyer. Thanks so much for being here with us. Now, right before that happened, we heard from the prosecution and the state, and they laid out pretty much their evidence should this had gone to trial. Was there anything that stood out to you in those moments?
The prosecutor just kind of had a bare bones recitation there. It wasn't read with, a lot of emotion or to try to convince the court. It was kind of a summary of what we all knew. And there certainly wasn't anything new from Mr. Kohberger at all. I thought, there could have been bargained for that Mr. Kohberger would share more information as to motive, where the knife went, things like that. But I think the public's in the dark on that.
Now, we are taking a live look here as well with us of the courthouse. That's what's happening right now in Ada County. One of the things that we've been talking about all morning with this plea deal is that the state has agreed to taking the death penalty off of the table if they agree to the fact that he would be sentenced for consecutive life sentences. The judge, though, saying here that he's not actually bound to that sentencing. So can you explain how that works and what we will likely see at sentencing?
Well, we're going to see mostly, this was all relatively short today, we're going to hear from the victim's family, and I suspect it's going to spill into the next day. There's a lot of people with a lot to say, times 4. And so I think that's optimistic of the judge. And it might be the case where the prosecutor has underestimated just how much the family has to say. It'll be directed to the judge. It'll be directed to the prosecutor. It's going to be directed to Mr. Kohberger. They're going to stare at him and be heard exhaustively. So that's going to be what we see. The judges have some sort of discretion, but it's all going to be anticlimactic because the judge is going to do life without possibility of parole. He's going to give the maximum. He realizes the only bargain, the only leniency is to take the firing squad off the table. Other than that, he's going to spend his entire life in jail. So it's going to be it's going to be more of a a catharsis really for the family to get out any criticism they have, of anybody involved in this besides the defendant.
So at sentencing, we'll hear from the victims' families. There's a lot of people that will speak. Will we hear from Kohberger potentially during the sentencing? And do you think that's an opportunity while they didn't get negotiated today? Could he elaborate more on what may have played out?
He could. He has a right of allocution to essentially say whatever he wants prior to the judge, imposing sentence. But I think the defense lawyer is smart enough to tell Mr. Kohberger to keep it short because the judge won't go less than life without parole, without the max. So.
You seem really confident in that statement. Is that just because of how brutal these murders were?
Yeah. I just don't think there's going to be anything less than the max, really.
One of the families, the Gonsalves family, they've been very outspoken. They've shared their emotions on this plea. They were not very happy that it was going this direction. One of the things they did ask for, though, would be that he give a full confession of what actually happened that night, but also turning over the murder weapon, or at least letting the law enforcement know where that murder weapon was left. Is that still off the table, or could that still happen between now and sentencing?
There could have been, other aspects to this resolution that we haven't heard about. I mean, this whole court process has been, largely sealed. There's been a lot of secrets that have kind of dribbled out over the last, months and years. So it could be, but I think we would have heard about it more. And it seems like a reasonable request to make for the prosecutor that they hear more. But that, if there's more details from Mr. Kohberger as to what happened, it wouldn't come on the day of sentencing. It would come out in the days to follow.
Sure.
But it wouldn't be. It's too much of a spectacle for his lawyers to put him through that, to have that splashed out right there for the first time. I think he's gonna bite his tongue. I don't think he's gonna have much to say at sentencing.
Well, thank you, Steve, for being here with us, answering some of those questions just out of this. Again, this trial just ending a few minutes ago here. We actually have some video from the hearing, specifically from the judge. The judge addressed the fact that this is a very public court case, and it is affecting not just the families, but the entire inland Northwest community.
A court is not supposed to, and this court will never, take into account public sentiment in making an opinion regarding its judicial decisions in cases. Courts should, and I always will, make decisions based on where the facts and the law lead me. Period. I have not read any of the numerous messages nor listen to any of the numerous voicemails that have been sent to me and my staff. Those have all been forwarded to security and, where appropriate, to law enforcement. I ask that you not continue to mount such campaigns or to send me information like this because, again, it is not appropriate and, frankly, not something I would take into account when deciding a matter in a case like this.
All right, so one of the more interesting things that Judge Hippler said was just how huge it was for Ada County to get prepared for what was going to be a trial in August. Right. He said they were going to have up to 10,000 people coming to Ada County to be potential jurors, and that was part of the reason they did this so quickly, this plea deal, that they wanted to make sure it was done and over and set in stone so that they could put a stop on all of those things happening in Ada County.
There's a lot of things that go into trials that happen before the trial actually happens. Part of it is jury selection. That takes sometimes weeks to vet people to make sure that there is a fair process for everyone involved. So that's why the judge, wanted to get this done soon. He did address the family's concern and criticism that this was happening very fast, but he said that that was the reason, was that should things not go the way they anticipated they go today, that they would still be on track and on the timeline for the trial that was scheduled for next month.
Yeah, and he actually started the entire hearing by saying, I have a quote right here, quote, "The court will never take into account public sentiment into their decisions." So we started off the entire hearing just making sure that the entire room there and the public understands that the decisions that they make in court have nothing to do with how big of a case this is, how public it has been.
Yeah, and he made that comment in reference to phone calls his office has received because there was sentiment out there that the public could call his office and it was bogging down their lines. He said that it was causing problems on other cases that the Ada County District Office is also working on, that this is not the only case that they're working on, and it sounds like they received a lot of calls and public feedback.
Yeah, and it was pretty quickly into the hearing that Judge Hippler started addressing Kohberger himself. He asked him several questions about safety of mind, whether he was of mind and ready to make a decision as big as this, pleading guilty to these murders. But one thing he did in the midst of asking all of those questions was ask him individually if he was guilty of each crime. So we want to listen to that right now.
Did you, on November 13th, 2022, enter the residence at 1122 King Road in Moscow, Idaho, with the intent to commit the felony crime of murder?
Yes.
Did you, on November 13th, 2022, in Latah County, state of Idaho, kill and murder Madison Mogen, a human being?
Yes.
And did you do that willfully, unlawfully, deliberately, and with premeditation and malice of forethought?
Yes.
Did you, on or about that same date in Moscow, Idaho, kill and murder Kaylee Gonzalez, a human being?
Yes.
And did you do that willfully, unlawfully, deliberately, and with premeditation and malice of forethought?
Yes.
And did you, on that same date in Moscow, Idaho, kill and murder Xana Kernodle, a human being?
Yes.
And did you do that willfully, unlawfully, deliberately, with premeditation and malice of forethought?
Yes.
And then on or about November 13th, 2022, again in Latah County, Idaho, did you kill and murder Ethan Chapin, a human being?
Yes.
Did you do that willfully, unlawfully, deliberately, with premeditation and malice of forethought?
Yes.
That was a part of the hearing that we just came out of moments ago, and that was the part where obviously all the victims' names were read. It was difficult to hear and also to hear the response from Kohberger.
Yeah, it's just a reminder that what we're talking about today is 4 human lives. Madison Mogen, Ethan Chapin, Kaylee Gonzalez, as well as Xana Kernodle. And so we have been in contact with the families over the past few days as this plea argument has come out. There have been some mixed reactions from families, but we did hear from Ben Mogen, who is Madison Mogen's father. He said that he is okay with this plea hearing happening.
Yeah, I think it's justice when you don't have to torture families that have been already through the most horrific thing they could ever imagine, you know. I think that's justice to not make that long and decades long, they say, even, you know, they said those death panel kind of, death row kind of things can go on for decades, and I don't want another day of this, and they're talking about decades. No, my family's not trying to do that.
Just before the hearing here in Ada County, our sister station actually was able to speak with the Gonsalves family as well, who has a very different feeling on how this whole plea hearing went.
What do you want to happen? Why do you want this to go to trial?
Because then my peers, this community, will decide that he's guilty. We can take it out of freaking Thompson's hands. One man shouldn't decide what 4 souls are worth.
The Gonsalves family has been very vocal about this in the last few days. They basically said that they were concerned about how quickly it happened, the fact that they were not involved in the process, which is something that can happen for people in a case particularly this big and this egregious.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, they felt like they didn't have enough time. They felt like they heard about this last Friday. And then on Sunday is when they got the email letting them know that this is the way that the state was going to proceed and offer on the table. So we also have a statement from them about this situation. This is something that we received before the hearing began.
Yeah, and Judge Hippler also expressed that this was extremely last minute. He said he just found out that this plea hearing was going to be happening on Monday. So it was not just for the families, it was everybody involved in the case that basically said that this was a very fast-moving event. But we are here, and we've gotten to this point where Bryan Kohberger pleaded guilty to all 4 counts of murder. This looks like it's a live look outside of the Ada County Courthouse right now. We earlier in this exact spot spoke with the Gonsalves family. You just heard from them a second ago, but we want to let you know what else they've been saying. They said, quote, "The Latah County Prosecutor's Office treatment of our family during this process is something I would not wish on anyone. We were not even called about the plea. We received an email with a letter attached. That is how Latah County's Prosecutor's Office treats murder victims' families. Our family is frustrated right now, and that will subside, and we will come together, as always, and deal with the reality that we face moving forward."
So you're taking a live look right now outside of Ada County as we wait to hear from people as they exit the courtroom. In the meantime, we wanted to take a look back at a timeline of how we got to this point. Abby Davis with our sister station in Boise has a look.
November 13th, 2022, a devastating day for the tight-knit college town of Moscow.
Breaking news. Just a moment ago, Moscow police confirmed 4 people were found dead in a home just steps away from the University of Idaho campus.
Police found 4 University of Idaho students stabbed to death in an off-campus home. The next day, they identified Xana Kernodle, Ethan Chapin, Kaylee Gonsalves, and Madison Mogan as the victims.
I believe this was an isolated, targeted attack on our victims.
Many students went home, finishing the semester online.
It's safe and no suspect. I'm just confused about what's going on.
Police asked for help looking for the driver of a white Hyundai Elantra, saying it was near the home around the time of the murders. They later linked an Elantra with Pennsylvania plates to their suspect, Bryan Kohberger. The WSU criminology grad student lived in Pullman, Washington, less than 10 miles away from Moscow. A month after the murders, Kohberger and his dad drove the car across country to his Pennsylvania family home. On their drive, police stopped the vehicle twice in Indiana.
Is this your car? Okay.
Police say they later collected DNA from his family's trash in Pennsylvania, providing them the information they needed to link Kohberger to DNA found on the knife sheath from the murder scene. And on December 30th, state police arrested him. He was extradited to Latah County for his first court appearance days later. At the same time, police released their probable cause affidavit, revealing major details in the investigation, including a Reddit post in which they say Kohberger asked how people commit crimes. Search warrants also detail what investigators took from Kohberger's Pullman apartment and storage unit.
Police department search warrant! Come to the door!
After a grand jury indicted him in May 2023, a judge entered a not guilty plea on his behalf.
Your Honor, we will be standing silent.
Meantime, the university decided to tear down the home on King Road. Kohberger's attorneys began arguing they wouldn't be able to find a fair and impartial jury in Latah County.
Being told that I am tainting the jury pool. I'm angry.
Please go ahead and be as angry as you like as you continue your work for the defense in this case.
An Idaho Supreme Court judge moved the trial to Ada County this fall. Around the same time, law enforcement took Kohberger to the county jail. His trial is scheduled for August 2025. It's expected to last 3 months. As Kohberger awaits his fate, Moscow continues to heal. Students wrapped up construction on the Vandal Healing Garden this summer, a space dedicated to remembering Xana, Ethan, Kaylee, and Madison.
The one thing I think it's really done is solidify what it means to be a member of the Vandal family. We are there for one another. We care for one another. We support one another.
Families of the victims also continue sharing memories of their loved ones.
When this is all said and done, if you remember these 4 kids, that's the end goal that we're all working towards.
We were a great family before, and we have to go on and continue to be that.
That was Abby Davis reporting on kind of a timeline of how we got to this point. It has been a long 2.5 years.
I was going to say the exact same
Yeah,
thing.
you know, this happened in November of 2022, and so it has been a long time to get to this point. Obviously, this is not how some wanted it to end. Some wanted to see it to go to trial, to have that evidence presented. But we did hear a small glimpse of how the state would have presented their case. That was a part of today's plea hearing. We heard from the prosecution a little bit more of a timeline that painted a picture that Kohberger may have been planning this for several months in advance. In fact, in March of that same year in 2022 is when they discovered that he bought a K-bar knife sheath on Amazon, and he didn't move to Pullman until July of 2022, months before the murders.
Yeah, so he was a WSU criminal justice PhD student. That is why he moved to Pullman. But again, like Tim said, he had bought the knife and knife sheath before even moving there. It wasn't until about July 9th of 2022 that the prosecution says his phone started pinging his location near the area of the King Road home where Madison Mogen, Xana Kernodle, Ethan Chapin, and Kaylee Consalvis were murdered. Between July 9th and November 7th, the state said the phone pinged 23 times in that area. Now, this is a very busy area. It's an area where a ton of college students live. It's right near the University of Idaho campus. So there was no saying from the state as to exactly where in that circle or area Kohberger's car was. But again, 23 times pinging in that area when he was not a U of I student.
Right.
He was in Pullman. So very interesting from the state there.
So our chief journalist, Amanda Rowley, was inside the courtroom. She was one of the reporters that got a spot to be inside the courtroom. Amanda, tell us more about what you observed in the courtroom. We were all watching it, but what did you observe from the various people in the room, and what stands out to you?
Well, right off the bat, Tim and Nicole, the courtroom was completely full with media and family members of the University of Idaho students. I sat on the left side of the courtroom, opposite of the family. I sat right behind Bryan Kohberger's family. They were also in attendance. For the most part, it remained pretty quiet, and it was quiet through listening to the questions that the judge asked Bryan Kohberger. This is the moment we wanted to hear. We've been waiting for to find out where does this case stand. I took transcription notes of that exchange between the judge and Bryan Kohberger. One of the questions he asked, did you enter that home on Moscow with the intent to commit murder? Bryan Kohberger said yes. He didn't say much throughout the question period. It was simply yes, no, mostly yeses. He said he was pleading guilty to all counts against him. That first-degree felony burglary count, he pleaded guilty. He pleaded guilty to count 2 through 5, which are the murder charges specific to each of the University of Idaho students. He pled guilty to all counts of murder. And each time the judge asked, did you intend to kill Madison Mogen, Kaylee Gonsalves, Xana Kernodle, and Ethan Chapman? And each time he said yes. And the feeling in the room, just hearing that, it kind of sunk to your stomach. It was a hushed courtroom. I looked back to see how the family was taking it, and they were looking straight ahead, continuing on with the proceeding. They did leave immediately after the hearing was done. We do have we have media lined up next to me if we want to take a look just to kind of see the gathering here. We were hoping to hear from the family, but I did see the Mogen family, and I do understand the Gonsalves family have left. I'm not certain on the Chapin family, but coming out here, I mean, it's a bit shocking. I mean, this is what he came to agree to. We understood that Kohberger was planning to accept this plea deal and plead guilty, and here it is. Tim, Nicole.
Yeah, Amanda, thank you for being there. Amanda's been there all morning, and I think the scale of this is something we want you to get at because you're there, you're seeing it. You've been covering courts and crime for years here in the Inland Northwest. How big is this compared to some of the other even bigger stories we've seen here?
This is the biggest case I have ever covered in my 10 years as a journalist and 8.5 years in Spokane County. I mean, the sheer size of media here, it feels bigger than it was even in Latah County. I spoke with our counterparts, our sister station at KTVB, even when the Daybell Vallow trial was taking place here at this very courthouse. The amount of media here doesn't come close to what we're seeing here today. Huge presence. I mean, I have media on my left, on my right, circled around here outside the front entrance. And I will say it was very respectful and cordial. Even Sheriff's Office said, hey, thank you for, limiting the chaos and being civil and polite through the proceedings. So this has really just been massive. I've been here since 5:30 this morning. Others have been here since 4 this morning. And just, it was done in a matter of what? We walked in at about 11:15 or so, 11 o'clock, and an hour and a half later, it's said and done with.
So, Amanda, I want to ask you more about being inside the courtroom. We were watching on a court live stream, so the quality isn't necessarily the best, but based on your observations, did you see any emotion from Kohberger? Did it seem like he was remorseful at all? Or what about the body language from, maybe the family members? That sounds like you were kind of on the other side, but did any of that you can offer us?
The emotion from Kohberger in the courtroom, Tim, was the same that we've seen in every court hearing since the beginning of this case. Looking straight ahead, maybe looking at his attorney, addressing the judge, one-word answers, no emotion at all. I'll say there was no emotion at all, one way or the other. I did mention his family was sitting in front of me. I couldn't get a clear view of what their reaction was during those question and answer period of, do you plead guilty? Do you plead guilty? Each time saying yes. I did see Bryan Kohberger's father. It looked like he was wiping his eyes a couple of times. He had his arm around a woman who I believe may be Kohberger's mother. But they that's what I saw from the courtroom. Again, couldn't quite see the family, the victims' families from across the courtroom, but from what I could see, they looked straight ahead as well, and for the most part remained pretty solid, and more just ready to get in and get out. Yeah.
Yeah, so Amanda, we've been noticing as you've been showing us around where you're standing, it looks like there's a bunch of microphones getting ready for some sort of gaggle. Do you have any idea who we might be able to hear from in the next few minutes?
Yeah, and I can give you guys another look here, looking at the corral of media. We're not certain who's coming out. Like I mentioned, I did see the Mogen family. They have left the area, as well as I understand the Gonsalves family, they have left as well. I don't have any word on the Chapin family at this point. I think we're just waiting on potentially lawyers of the families to speak, to give context. When I've covered the proceedings in Latah County, we immediately heard, I believe, if I recall correctly, it was immediately after Kohberger's arraignment, right on the steps of the Latah County Courthouse was the Gonsalves family lawyer, Shannon Gray. He stood with the Gonsalves family and immediately spoke to the media, giving their thoughts about those proceedings. So kind of something that I had expected here today. So it's really a hurry up and wait on who may step forward. I think, if anything, it's likely to see the lawyers, as we did see a lot of those families leave the area.
Amanda, while we wait for that, why don't you break down for our viewers what comes next? We know that sentencing is on July 23rd. This essentially skips what would happen in the trial, a typical trial. So now we skip to sentencing. Explain to viewers what happens now that Kohberger has made this change of plea.
Yeah, so July 22nd, 9:30, we'll be back here in court. Just a little context, though, right? We were expecting the trial to start in August, and the judge even said that. He said, I had no pre-information or any mentions of a plea deal. I was notified on Monday that this was happening. So he said before Monday this week, he was fully anticipating everything was on track for this August start for the trial. He explained that turning it around for this plea hearing, making this a turnaround so quickly, was in order to reduce costs of bringing in what they were expecting to be 10,000 jurors. So just want to give a little bit of context there. So as far as the sentencing goes, July 22nd, this is when we will hear the nitty-gritty from the prosecutor and the defense attorneys telling the judge what their sentencing recommendations are based on the plea deal, plea agreement. Once that's given, we expect to hear family victim impact statements. And that goes, of course, to both sides. We'll hear from family and friends of the 4 University of Idaho students, and we could also hear from Bryan Kohberger's family. The judge will hear those impact statements. We did hear from the prosecutor that he anticipates hearing from the families of the University of Idaho students. He expects that to conclude within that day. He said if we start at 9:30, we will hear from the family members and conclude at the end of the day. We've covered several sentencing in the inland Northwest. The Freeman High School shooter sentencing lasted for weeks, hearing from all the impactment. But we're expecting a one-day sentencing at this point. The judge is expecting if we need to go longer, they will bleed into from the 23rd rather into the 24th for sentencing. And that is when we'll have a better idea of what the punishment is going to be. The judge explained the process as far as what he can do. He's the final say. He can decide whether or not to accept that deal, and he can choose within the lawful range. But the judge will listen to the recommendation and have the final say on what that sentencing is. Tim?
Yeah, Amanda, so one of the things that we were just speaking with a defense lawyer about is that he said he was shocked by the judge saying that this sentencing would take just one day because of how impactful this is for the family. So interesting you mentioned that as well, considering some of the other trials we've seen.
Yeah, definitely.
Now, one thing we want to talk about, you mentioned the judge doesn't have to actually accept the plea agreement and what's in it necessarily for sentencing. So what does the state recommend for sentencing timeframes?
Let's see. So the judge did read what that sentencing would be. It looks as though it would be... He walked through at least, a fine, that sort of thing. For counts 2 through 5, those first-degree murder charges would be life in prison with mandatory minimum of 10 years on each count, in addition to restitution of $5,000 fine for each of the victims to give to their families. And there's a $50,000 fine with the burglary charge. I'm reading through my notes here on what that count includes, but so it would be a life sentence, and they would run consecutively. So there's they would run all together.
And then, Amanda, you did take a lot of notes while you were in the courtroom. When the prosecution and the state kind of presented a high overview of the evidence that they would have presented during trial, was there anything that surprised you, anything that we didn't know beforehand? You know, this case is very interesting because it is so high profile. So much of it has leaked, a lot of it in that Dateline special. What stood out to you? You've been covering this for the last 2.5 years. Was there anything that we didn't know already?
Well, something new that stood out to me, I mean, when we first got on scene that following day, when we saw the property, we looked at the entrances to this home. And we finally now have it confirmed from the prosecutor's lips that Bryan Kohberger entered that home on King Road through the back sliding door. He said he immediately went upstairs to the third floor where Kaylee and Maddie were at and killed them. And he also mentioned towards the end, he goes, "We are not submitting that Kohberger intended to kill as many of these students as he did, but he had bumped into them on his way out, and that is what happened. That's what unfolded." So the path in which he accessed the home and on his way out, when the roommates saw him, it was on his way back out of the kitchen through that door. We also learned a little bit more about how much of his cell phone was being tracked, that he had taken a selfie. Later that morning, he returned back to his Pullman apartment, took a selfie in the bathroom with a thumbs up. I mean, this is evidence that we had no idea would come out, and this is what we're learning today.
All right, our chief journalist, Amanda Rowley, reporting live in Ada County for us. Amanda, thanks so much for your reporting. We'll check back in with you for KREM 2 News at noon and throughout our evening shows.
Yeah, so just a reminder of what we're covering right now. Bryan Kohberger pleaded guilty to murdering the 4 University of Idaho students 2.5 years ago. Since those murders, the University of Idaho Vandal community has really come together to work through that grief. One thing they did is produce a healing garden. Take a look.
When I come back in 20 years, I hope to see a thriving garden, a happy garden, a colorful garden. I hope to see people in it. I hope there's more life around here as it grows. But we really wanted to make things special here, choose things that people could really tie back into their family members or loved ones that they've lost.
There we go. So this morning we've put in the first pieces of our main memorial for Xana, Ethan, Kaylee, and Maddie.
It's been over 1.5 years, almost 2 years in the making.
The memorial piece is everything that we work towards. It's honoring the people that this whole project was made for.
I remember back in the fall we were kind of discussing what a memorial should look like or how we would even want to be remembered.
To see the progress that we've made and see everything really coming together, it's like indescribable, really.
It only has an 8-foot break. When they first started thinking about, I'm going to be in the class and we're going to create this garden and memorial, what is that thing going to be? Was the first question they asked themselves. And we learned pretty quickly that we couldn't answer that until we asked a lot of other people a lot of questions.
All those conversations has led to that moment. It's been countless hours and late nights.
Some of the decisions that we made along the way really managed to stay there all the way through the end. That little angle there is our choice. It was emotional. It was emotional to see that culmination of all that work actually make its way onto site and into place.
Seeing the structure go up was like a big wow moment for us.
We're really trying to send this message of joy and life and hope throughout the entire garden. We've lost those students. We really want the space to carry on the qualities of them that made them who they were.
The idea is that there'll be a series of panels that are facing their nameplate that are a different color that's dedicated to them.
It's the series of many hand-patinaed panels that just capture light.
If it was any project other than this project, we probably would have just said, hey, hold on, we're going to have someone else do some of this labor.
All of us felt like a really deep impact by what happened. We'll come in at 5 a.m. in the morning. We'll work for 7 hours till lunch, then we go to lunch and we don't come back till 5:30 or 6, and we work a few hours in the evening.
There's over 1,000 of these shelves that'll have hand-built votives that hold candles.
We were working on the blocks that are in the walls here before we were even
allowed to come and break ground on site. In just one individual block, there's at least 6 to 8 cuts. The idea is that people can take these out and they can have their note that they wrote, they can place it in there. Hopefully that in times of need, in times of vandal need, there will be plenty of filled spaces and plenty of tea lights on.
This might be one of the most emotional projects, I think, in my entire life.
I didn't think I could work this hard and push through so much. There's been a few of us who have gone through some personal loss. I lost my grandpa during the first semester, and it was really tough. I hadn't experienced something like that before, and I'm so grateful and blessed to have all these students by my side. So them and the project just helped me a lot.
It's a big sacrifice to take on a project like this. We'll have hopefully projects that have impacts on the community and that have positive things, but never one where we're holding the community's heart in our hands the way we have on this project.
All the hard work and dedication and the passion that really went into building this thing is something that'll drive me personally.
I'm most grateful for these students. They're special. When they're exhausted, they come in. When they don't want to come in, they come in. They pick themselves up after failures. They pick themselves up after setbacks, and they do it all for free. That's pretty special. No, I mean, I love them.
I'm excited for this to help everyone else the way it helped me, and I know it helped a lot of other people too.
The story of the healing garden there. We do have some statements, Nicole, that are coming in right now. Tim just stepped off to continue our coverage elsewhere. Laura Papetti here with Nicole Hernandez. This one just coming in.
So we've just received this statement. It's from the mayor of Moscow. He said in part, quote, "I don't think it will ever be possible for us to comprehend the senseless murder of 4 young people in the prime of their lives and the impact it had and continues to have on their families and friends. This was a horrific and tragic event that shocked our close-knit community to the core, one that still reverberates today."
And also a statement coming in from the University of Idaho. It says, "We keep the families of the victims in our hearts as each deals with this outcome in their own way. We will never forget the 4 incredible lives taken on King Road. They are forever Vandals, and each holding a place in our Vandal family. Since that fateful day in November 2022, our university has become stronger, more intent on its purpose, and more supportive of each other. And while we will not forget, we will heal." And to speak to that, we just showed the story about the healing garden. One step in many that have come before and that will continue to heal in the community in general, but certainly the Vandal community.
Yeah, absolutely. And just a reminder, if you're just now joining us, we're covering this because Bryan Kohberger pleaded guilty to all 4 counts of murder plus a burglary charge in the murders of Madison Mogen, Ethan Chapin, Xana Kernodle, and Kaylee Gonsalves. We actually have video from the courtroom of when he made that guilty plea.
Based on the state's proffer and, importantly, based upon defendants' explicit admission to committing these crimes, the court finds there is a factual basis. Therefore, with respect to count 1, burglary, felony, how do you plead, Mr. Kohberger, guilty or not guilty?
Guilty.
As to count 2, murder in the first degree, as it relates to the murder of Madison Mogen, how do you plead, guilty or not guilty?
Guilty.
As to count 3, as it relates to murder in the first degree for the murder of Kaylee Gonsalves, how do you plead, guilty or not guilty?
Guilty.
As to count 4, the first degree murder of Xana Kernodle, a human being, how do you plead, guilty or not guilty?
Guilty.
As to count 5, the first degree murder of Ethan Chapin, a human being, how do you plead, guilty or not guilty?
Guilty.
Right. The court will find that the defendant understands the nature of the charges and each offense and the possible consequences to him of his guilty plea. The court finds that there is a factual basis for the plea and finds the defendant believes the plea to be in his best interest. I find that the plea was given freely, voluntarily, and was intelligently made. I accept the plea. I direct that it be entered.
All right. So he said yes when asked if he was guilty of the charges. Lots of procedural process to go through, legal information to go through today. But the crux of it is, asked if he was guilty, responded with yes on all counts, the 4 murders and the burglary charge we talked about.
Right. And this has been now 2.5 years in the making. This murder is happening in November of 2022. A lot, of course, has happened since then. One of the big things that happened through that was that investigators had to actually go through and find evidence.
I'm going to actually interrupt you right now. I'm hearing from our producers that we are now about to hear from the family, one of the families, live in Ada County. Let's listen in.
I'm Leander James from the law firm of James, Vernon, and Weeks in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho. I'm a victims' rights attorney. For the past 2 years, I've had the privilege and the honor to provide pro bono representation in this criminal case for Karen Laramie and Scott Laramie, the loving mother and stepfather of Maddie Mogan. I will be reading a statement of gratitude today from the Laramies. 962 days ago, we lost our Maddie, our kind, loving, vivacious, and caring daughter full of purpose and promise. We are grateful for the gift of her life, and we have grieved the loss of that life during each of these 962 days. We love you, Maddie, and we miss you. We are grateful for the gift of the young, vivacious, promising lives of Kaylee, Xana, and Ethan, and we deeply, deeply mourn their senseless loss. We remain in solidarity with their families and friends, and we continue to shower them with our prayers and support. We are grateful for their prayers, love, and support that they have given us. They have helped us and sustained us during our darkest times. We are grateful to the prosecutor, Bill Thompson, and his dedicated and caring team, including victim coordinators Kim and Stacy, who have helped to guide us through the sometimes confusing and disorienting legal process. Thank you for all your dedicated, diligent, and tireless commitment to justice. We support the plea agreement 100%. While we know there are some who do not support it, we ask that they respect our belief that this is the best outcome possible for the victims, their families, and the state of Idaho. We extend our deep gratitude to the many law enforcement officers and staff who worked tirelessly to obtain the critical evidence that brought justice today, including the Moscow Police Department, the FBI, the Idaho State Patrol, and the Lehigh County Sheriff's Department. We are deeply grateful to Judge Hippler and Judge John Judge before him. We thank you for your diligence, thoughtfulness, and judicial guidance. We appreciate the difficult work you have done to balance the rights of all involved and to uphold the rule of law. You have had our prayers and support throughout this case. We send our love and gratitude to the many family and friends who have supported us, cared for us, and helped us to heal our open emotional wounds. To the good people of North Idaho, who have showered us with kindness and support, we thank you. We also mourn today with you the recent tragic and senseless loss of 2 brave North Idaho firefighters. We extend our prayers and support to their families. You are not alone. We understand your pain. For all parents who have endured the loss of a child, we know recovery is a long and at times an almost unbearable journey. But you are not alone. And there is hope and there is healing. We thank those in the press who have respected our privacy and the grieving process, and the privacy and grieving process of the families of Kaylee, Xana, and Ethan. To others in the press, we gently encourage you to do the same. We thank the many people across our nation and beyond who have reached out to us, prayed for us, and extended their kindness. You too have helped us on our journey to heal. We now embark on a new path. We turn from tragedy and mourning. We turn from darkness and uncertainty of the legal process to the light of the future. We have closure. We embark on a path of hope and healing. We invite all of those who have mourned with us to join us, and we wish you well. Thank you. I will now share a few words of my own. Over the past 2 years, I've been amazed and humbled by Karen and Scott's strength, endurance, and faith. They have uplifted me and so many. They founded a nonprofit to help others in the name of Maddie. They have been a beacon of hope amidst a dark and tragic time. To those young and bright attorneys out there looking for purpose and meaning in your profession, I invite you to join the effort of crime victim attorneys to bring victims justice with compassion, empathy, humility, and understanding. This case is not the end of violence. This case is not the end of lawlessness. We need your help to bring hope and healing to the innocent caught in the crossfire of life. Thank you all.
Sir, could you just say your name one more time?
All right. Hearing just now, we've been hearing from the attorney for Maddie Mogen's family, taking the time today, on this day where the plea deal was accepted by a judge, where Bryan Kohberger accepted guilt on 4 counts of murder and a count of burglary. They took the time today to have their attorneys speak and address media and the public, saying thank you to so many people who have worked on this case, saying they are deeply grateful to the judges and appreciate the difficult work that they have done. They said, prayers and the support that they have received from the public, specifically saying from the good people of North Idaho. They are so grateful for their kindness and their support during this time, this horrific process over the last couple of years since Maddie Mogen, Xana Kernodle, Ethan Chapin, Kaylee Gonsalves were murdered, talking about the support that they have received has been such a part of their ability to get through. They also took time to note today, on this day, that they are grieving, along with the folks of the Inland Northwest, North Idaho, in the death and the murder of the 2 firefighters over the weekend, talking about how they understand the grief of those families, and taking time to note that those firefighters and their families are in their thoughts and in their prayers. They talked about the recovery being such a long road, sometimes an unbearable journey, is how it was phrased. And understanding that this has been just one more step, albeit a very large step in this process. We're going to take a moment now and join Chief Journalist Amanda Rowley, who was in the courtroom this morning for the plea deal and has been covering the case. And she is live in Ada County in Boise. And Amanda, just hearing from the attorney now, Maddie Mogen's family attorney, emotional, to say the least, talking about how they're so grateful for the support. What are you saying right there, right now? And then we'll go back to what happened earlier as well.
Yes, right after that statement, the family didn't add anything else. They have just exited, I believe, going around the outside of the courthouse. This is the one and only family statement that we've heard right outside the courthouse following the hearing. This was the family's attorney, Leander James. They talked about in their statement, they call this the best possible outcome, and they support the plea agreement 100%. Laura?
That's right. Something they did want to point out that they are grateful for today and for those involved in making this happen. Just a very quick question, as I know you need to go continue our coverage. Amanda, you were in the courtroom this morning. It seems like there were no big surprises, certainly, but what was, give us a little bit of a look for those just joining us, emotionally, what was it like in the courtroom?
You know, emotionally, it was, there was kind of a hushed tone. Of course, you have to be quiet in the courtroom, but you could kind of feel, I mean, my heart sunk, if I can be candid. My heart sunk. It was just, you could feel the impact hearing Bryan Kohberger say, yes, guilty. I plead guilty to all 5 counts, the burglary count and the counts of murder. I mean, I looked around the room just to see how everyone kind of reacted, and it's just, I think people are kind of processing, and the same goes for the Chapin family. I kind of looked across the courtroom, and it looked as though just the family's processing this, right? I was sitting right behind Bryan Kohberger's family. It appeared a couple of times he had brushed his hand against his eyes a couple of times, and he put his arm around a woman he was sitting next to. But for the most part, kind of hushed tones is the best way to describe it, and processing what's happened here today.
What is next? We understand, of course, that there is the sentencing coming up in July. Will be held in the same place, the same courthouse as, of course, where you are today, because it was really already scheduled to be cleared out for this case had there been a trial. So give us a quick update on that.
Yeah. Yeah, right. We were expecting this trial to go mid-August, and the judge even mentioned they were anticipating a jury pool of 10,000. So they looked at the week of July 22nd. They landed on, attorneys and the judge landed on July 23rd for the sentencing at 9:30 a.m. The prosecutor believes they should be able to wrap up with victim impact statements from the University of Idaho students' families as well within the day. They expect to be wrapped up with the sentencing within that day. The judge did schedule it through the 24th, so July 23rd and 24th, in anticipation if it does go a bit long. When we get to the sentencing hearing, we're going to hear more details of what is in the plea agreement. This is the time when the prosecutors present the recommended sentencing. The judge ultimately has the final say, though. So, but he has to make that sentencing within the lawful range established in state statute. So we could see something a little bit different or the same as what's being presented to the judge. Once that's done, the case is concluded. We'll hear from the victims' family members, and it'll wrap up from there, Laura.
All right, Amanda, thank you. Amanda Rowley reporting again from the Ada County Courthouse for us. Do want to mention, of course, today the prosecution, even though it was a plea hearing, was asked to give a brief synopsis of their case. And so we want to take a moment now to listen into a story done by Abby Davis from our sister station, KTVB, taking a look back at the timeline of what happened.
November 13th, 2022, a devastating day for the tight-knit college town of Moscow.
Breaking news. Just a moment ago, Moscow police confirmed 4 people were found dead in a home just steps away from the University of Idaho campus.
Police found 4 University of Idaho students stabbed to death in an off-campus home. The next day, they identified Xana Kernodle, Ethan Chapin, Kaylee Gonzalez, and Madison Mogan as the victims.
I believe this was an isolated, targeted attack on our victims.
Many students went home, finishing the semester online.
It's safe and no suspect. I'm just confused about what's going on.
Police asked for help looking for the driver of a white Hyundai Elantra, saying it was near the home around the time of the murders. They later linked an Elantra with Pennsylvania plates to their suspect, Bryan Kohberger. The WSU criminology grad student lived in Pullman, Washington, less than 10 miles away from Moscow. A month after the murders, Kohberger and his dad drove the car across country to his Pennsylvania family home. On their drive, police stopped the vehicle twice in Indiana.
Is this your car? Okay.
Police say they later collected DNA from his family's trash in Pennsylvania. providing them the information they needed to link Kohberger to DNA found on the knife sheath from the murder scene. And on December 30th, state police arrested him. He was extradited to Latah County for his first court appearance days later. At the same time, police released their probable cause affidavit, revealing major details in the investigation, including a Reddit post in which they say Kohberger asked how people commit crimes. Search warrants also detail what investigators took from Kohberger's Pullman apartment and storage unit.
Police department search warrant! Come to the door!
After a grand jury indicted him in May 2023, a judge entered a not guilty plea on his behalf.
Your Honor, we will be standing silent.
Meantime, the university decided to tear down the home on King Road. Kohberger's attorneys began arguing they wouldn't be able to find a fair and impartial jury in Latah County.
Being told that I am tainting the jury pool. I'm angry.
Please go ahead and be as angry as you like as you continue your work for the defense in this case.
An Idaho Supreme Court judge moved the trial to Ada County this fall. Around the same time, law enforcement took Kohberger to the county jail. His trial is scheduled for August 2025. It's expected to last 3 months. As Kohberger awaits his fate, Moscow continues to heal. Students wrapped up construction on the Vandal Healing Garden this summer, a space dedicated to remembering Xana, Ethan, Kaylee, and Madison.
The one thing I think it's really done is solidify what it means to be a member of the Vandal family. We are there for one another. We care for one another. We support one another.
Families of the victims also continue sharing memories of their loved ones.
When this is all said and done, if you remember these 4 kids, that's the end goal that we're all working towards.
We were a great family before, and we have to go on and continue to be that.
KREM 2 News at Noon begins now.
Are you pleading guilty because you are guilty?
Yes.
Breaking news now, continuing our live coverage from KREM 2 Plus right now. We've been bringing you the plea hearing for Bryan Kohberger this morning as he admits that he killed 4 University of Idaho students in November of 2022. Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us here on KREM 2 News at Noon. I'm Laura Papetti. If you've been with us all morning long, then you have likely been tracking this story with us as we continue to follow the story of Bryan Kohberger and the court accepting a plea deal today. All right, we have Amanda Rowley, our chief journalist. She was in the courtroom this morning, and she is joining us live now. Amanda, thanks for being with us. We know you've been tracking this story all day long. First, for those just joining us, take us through some key moments this morning, of course, when Bryan Kohberger, for the first time, saying yes, he committed the murders.
Yeah, Laura, again, I think emotion remains the same when we watch Kohberger. It's remained the same, his interactions in the courtroom from the first hearing. We saw him in Moscow in Latah County. I will say he answered with yes or no to every question the judge asked and was very emotionless. Looking around the courtroom, you could feel kind of it sunk in, right? When the judge asked for each of the counts, burglary and all 4 counts of murder, and said, yes, I'm entering a guilty plea. The room, you could feel the weight of that. There wasn't any emotional reactions, but when I looked back at some of the victims' family members, they were looking straight ahead, almost as though they were processing that this moment was happening. Some of the key moments, the prosecutor outlined, Latah County Prosecutor Bill Thompson outlined evidence that would have been presented by the state in trial. We actually learned a few pieces that we wouldn't have, we haven't known about how Kohberger accessed the home. And the state says they have evidence to believe that Kohberger entered the home, the Moscow home on King Road, through the back kitchen sliding door. I remember that. I remember being on scene the first day of getting the report of this crime and seeing the different entrances, and that backsliding door was a big question. So now we know, based on state evidence, that Kohberger entered through that back door, went up to Kaylee and Maddie's room, and they say they were killed first. And then as he exited, the state says as Bryan Kohberger exited the home, ran into Xana, and that is when she was killed, and subsequently Ethan was killed. They say he exited back out that kitchen sliding door, and some other details that came to light is his cell phone showed him taking a selfie later on that morning, about 9:30 that Sunday morning, in his bathroom with a thumbs up. Just minor, big details that we haven't heard of before. A lot more about his GPS signal of where his phone was placed, as well as DNA gathering. Just a lot to take in from this case.
And Amanda, the families present today, the judge talked about how this all happened so quickly that he found out about it on Monday, and then the families finding out about it.
Yeah.
The families and people surrounding the families joining in today for this important, obviously, hearing. They were all there, correct?
Yes, the Chapin family, the Mogan family, and the Gonsalves family all here today. I believe Kernodle, they were all here, and they came with support, right? They had multiple family members, friends with them in the courtroom today.
All right. Amanda Rowley reporting for us. Amanda, you've been following this case now since the beginning and in the courtroom today. We appreciate having some great perspective there, being able to take us through that. Thank you very much. And Amanda will continue her reporting throughout the day. Amanda mentioning what it was like in the courtroom today, as for the first time we are all hearing that Bryan Kohberger accepting responsibility, accepting guilt for the murders of 4 University of Idaho students and for that burglary. Let's take a moment and listen in.
Did you, on November 13th, 2022, enter the residence at 1122 King Road in Moscow, Idaho, with the intent to commit the felony crime of murder?
Yes.
Did you, on November 13th, 2022, in Latah County, state of Idaho, kill and murder Madison Mogan, a human being?
Yes.
And did you do that willfully, unlawfully, deliberately, and with premeditation and malice of forethought?
Yes.
Did you, on or about that same date in Moscow, Idaho, kill and murder Kaylee Gonsalves, a human being?
Yes.
And did you do that willfully, unlawfully, deliberately, and with premeditation and malice of forethought?
Yes.
And did you, on that same date in Moscow, Idaho, kill and murder Xana Kernodle, a human being?
Yes.
And did you do that willfully, unlawfully, deliberately, with premeditation and malice of forethought?
Yes.
And then on or about November 13th, 2022, again in Latah County, Idaho, did you kill and murder Ethan Chapin, a human being?
Yes.
Did you do that willfully, unlawfully, deliberately, with premeditation and malice of forethought?
Yes.
That's from the courtroom earlier today. And we do have a guest joining us now, attorney Jeffrey Feiner. Jeffrey, thank you for being with us. You've been an attorney for 40 years, so here to give us some perspective, just overall perspective of the proceedings today.
Certainly, I'm happy to do that. There's relief for a lot of people with this decision to plead guilty, but the pain and the trauma is going to go on. First of all, there's going to be a sentencing coming up in about a month.
Right.
We know what the sentence is going to be. It's going to be 4 consecutive life terms.
And that's what the judge said. That is the higher end. They technically have the ability, the court, to lower the sentence, but that's unlikely, I assume.
It's not going to happen.
Okay, so 4 consecutive life sentences and
without parole.
Without parole.
Which means he will die in prison. And it also means that the state is done with the prosecution. The $1 million or more it would have taken to run this trial isn't going to have to be spent. The possibility of maybe some kind of verdict that would be upsetting is gone. The defense, they're all gone.
Well, in just the trial itself, I mean, irrespective of what the outcome would have been of the trial itself would have been so brutal
Yes.
for families to have sat through.
At the end of crime, the trauma's not over.
Right.
And if there's law enforcement and they catch a perpetrator and they put the perpetrator on trial, there's still grief and trauma for everyone involved. And it's not a question of expense only financial, it's expense emotionally on everyone.
Absolutely.
This would have been a very difficult case to go through a trial. And it may not have been a foregone conclusion, although my best guess is, having now heard the plea, it would have been extremely difficult to defend this case.
But a massive case nonetheless. They talked
Yes.
about having to bring in 10,000 people to vet them for a jury.
That seems large. I don't know that it would have taken that much, but it does require that you have 12 people ultimately sitting who can say in good faith that they don't have a predetermined decision about the outcome. It could have been tried. Eventually we get juries to sit. But the thing is people want finality. And this is the only problem I can see with the decision of what happened today, is that we have finality for a trial. There's not going to be one. But he waived any right to an appeal, and that means he's not going to be allowed to appeal any sentence he does get. And it seems like that will be the end of it. But I have to say, it's actually never over in a case of this size.
Right.
He can always allege that his defense counsel weren't adequate for him.
Even though today he answered the judge in sort of that procedural moments that he was not being forced to do this, he had not
Correct.
been promised anything.
Correct.
So he can still go back?
Well, yes, any defendant can at some point within a year, generally, after a conviction like this, and say, you know, I wasn't told certain critical things, or my lawyers failed me, and when I told the judge I wasn't forced, that was based on what I knew at the time. It doesn't happen often. It rarely works, but I want to say this much. The finality, it's never final. There could be another court proceeding within a year's time. He can allege new evidence that he now has that his lawyers failed him. I don't foresee that, but I caution folks when they talk about, is this over? It's probably over, but he may yet be in the headlines in a year's time attacking his lawyers. That's really the last step of it, but then the real finality, the peace for the families is inescapable. The families that agreed to this, the families that don't agree to this resolution, their pain goes on, no
Because
matter.
all the families have different perspectives,
Of
and
course.
understandably so.
Of course.
One last quick question. I thought it was interesting today, but you may have some good perspective on this. There has been a gag order in effect. The judge held that gag order until sentencing.
Yeah.
Why not let people speak, being that there's not likely going to be now a trial?
That's a great question. We're not going to see a jury in this case. The jury's aspect of this is now gone.
Right.
He is found guilty. Sentencing, however, is still a moment of great focus, and it is conceivable that a lifting of the gag order could affect sentencing. And it could affect what happens afterwards. I suspect the judge will be forced legally to withdraw the order when the sentencing is done. He does have 30 days in which he can file an appeal. It won't be granted. He's already given up that right. But that kind of tumult that sometimes comes after a case, it's probably best to leave the gag order in place a little longer. Personally, I thought the gag order was gone. Once the jury was out of the scene, I thought, well, that's the end of the gag order. No, the judge is being very careful. And as I thought about it more deeply, I think this judge is wisely using another month of gag order just so that something doesn't go wrong. Sometimes things go wrong.
And there's a lot of emotion, of course.
There
and
is
a lot
a great
of things
deal of
that can get out there. Oh, right.
Yeah.
We appreciate it so much.
You're welcome.
You're sort of retired, and we appreciate you
Sort of retired.
coming in and spending a little bit of time with us, giving some perspective. We're going to take a quick break here on KREM 2 News at noon. We'll be right back with more.
962 days ago, we lost our Maddie, our kind, loving, vivacious, and caring daughter full of purpose and promise. We are grateful for the gift of her life, and we have grieved the loss of that life during each of these 962 days. We love you, Maddie, and we miss you.
That is the attorney for Maddie Mogen's family. Maddie Mogen, of course, one of the 4 University of Idaho students murdered by Bryan Kohberger. Kohberger accepting guilt today as part of a plea agreement in the courtroom in Ada County. It has been 962 days. 962 days, that family has said they have grieved and they have waited. And thanking the public, thanking those involved for all the support and love. Maddie Mogen's family's attorney speaking on their behalf today outside the courtroom. It has been a long couple of years, 2.5 or more years. There's been several key dates that all led to the plea hearing that we heard today. KREM TV's Brandon T. Jones, he is standing by live in the studio right now. Brandon, this has been certainly a long process for the families to hear what they heard today.
Started on November 13th of 2022. That was the day that Ethan Chapin, Madison Mogen, Xana Kernodle, and Kaylee Gonsalves were found brutally stabbed to death in their off-campus house in Moscow. For weeks, the killer remained on the run, and nearly a month later, on December 7th, police announced a vehicle of interest, a white Hyundai Elantra, spotted near the crime scene of the murders. It wouldn't come until the end of the month, on December 30th, the date police announced Bryan Kohberger's arrest in Pennsylvania for the murders of the 4 University of Idaho students. We learned Kohberger was a PhD student at Washington State and was being charged with burglary and 4 counts of first-degree murder. The suspect was extradited back to Idaho on January 4th. Court documents released the following day revealed a strong DNA match found on a knife sheath, DNA that matched with Kohberger. On January 12th, his first court appearance. Later in the year, we learned on June 26th that prosecutors will pursue the death penalty for Kohberger. A full year later, after postponing the trial, on June 27th, 2024, a new trial date is officially set and delayed until 2025. Another delay in trial is announced. We eventually learned that Kohberger can officially face the death penalty if convicted, which leads us to now. On June 30th, we learned Kohberger accepts a plea deal. Today in court, when asked by the judge, are you pleading guilty because you are guilty? Kohberger, with a single word, answered, yes. For now, in the studio, Brandon T. Jones, KREM 2 News.
Well, we are still under a weather impact alert for today. Coming up, we'll explain why we're seeing red flag warnings in parts of our region.
All right. You have been following us here on KREM 2, following the Bryan Kohberger hearing today, the plea deal that was accepted by a judge where Bryan Kohberger accepted guilt in the murders of 4 University of Idaho students. We want to show you their pictures if we can. They were just popped up for a moment. But we want to say their names: Kaylee Gonzalez, Santa Kernodle, Ethan Chapin, and Maddie Mogan, the victims in this case. Sentencing has been scheduled for July, and we will certainly have all the details on this case continuing throughout the day and tonight on KREM 2 News at 4.